Amending the Constitution. So, we've explored the Supreme Court, we've explored a large aspect of the American system. Now let's look at the Constitution itself, and specifically how it is that we change the Constitution. So, the initial 10 amendments. So, way back, 1780s, when the U.S. Constitution is first being established. They first hold the constitutional conventions and produce the initial Constitution. That's the Constitution without any amendments. That Constitution lacked any mention of personal liberties. And as a result of this, a huge debate issued when the Constitution was sent to the state assemblies for ratification. Many states were absolutely distraught at the idea of approving a government where there was no clear-cut mention of personal liberties, especially since so much effort had been outlined in the American Revolution about the motivations for the war being to protect the personal liberties of Americans that the revolutionaries felt that the British were violating. And this raised a new issue. Why were these rights not being listed? Now, the Federalists, those who approved the Constitution, tried incredibly hard to argue that this wasn't necessary. They argued, one, that the government was already so limited by the Constitution that it was in no way, shape, or form strong enough to be a threat to people's personal liberties. Others further argued that this thing Alexander Hamilton tried really hard to argue and was ultimately unsuccessful. He tried to argue that to enumerate the rights, to make a list of them, was a bad idea because if you forgot something or you didn't include a right, you essentially were forfeiting it. Better to leave them unlisted, to be claimed later as need be. But regardless, people wanted a guarantee that the government was going to respect certain basic liberties. And eventually the Federalists relented, stating that if the states ratified the Constitution and approved the new government, the first thing they were going to do was to draft these new amendments which would guarantee personal liberties. And people went for it. States eventually ratified the Constitution. So, the first 10 amendments, and we're going to go over them, we're going to read from the list in class. These first amendments to the U.S. Constitution enshrine personal liberties, including religious liberty, free press, free assembly, the right to bear arms, habeas corpus, right to protection from cruel and unusual punishments, etc. All of these rights are preserved in the Bill of Rights, and they're the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So, limited amendments. Now, since its original ratification in 1788, that's when the first original 9 states ratified the Constitution, the 9 out of 13 that gave them enough of a majority to state that the Constitution was ratified, that since then only 27 amendments total have been added to the document. So that means 230 years. In 230 years, the document has only needed to be amended 27 times. That becomes even more remarkable when it is remembered that 2 of the amendments actually cancel each other out. That's right. The 18th Amendment and the 21st Amendment cancel each other out. The 18th Amendment banned the sale of alcohol and intoxicating spirits within the U.S. The 21st Amendment existed to repeal the 18th Amendment. So right there, when you consider that those two cancel each other out, that really means that from the original 1788 Constitution, there were only a grand total of 25 new ideas that needed to be added to the document to get it to its current state. So, how do you actually do this? So, I know you're saying, yeah, I know, Teach. I know it's only been amended 27 times, and 2 of those cancel each other out, so it's like 25. But I got a really good idea. I think it should be part of the Constitution. So if I was going to do that, Mr. Skanga, how would I even go about doing that? And the answer is, well, there's actually two methods. Now, first of all, the founders understood that the Constitution was meant to be the supreme law of the land. This is the law that's binding over the entire U.S. government, and it cancels out any other law that contradicts it. So any federal or state law that contradicts the Constitution is null and void. So this law is incredibly powerful and incredibly binding. And as a result of that, it's not something that should be able to be easily changed. And that adds a lot of force to the document. And so the founders made it deliberately difficult to actually amend the document, to actually change anything in it. Because remember, amending it doesn't just mean adding stuff, it can mean taking stuff away, as we noted with the 18th and 21st Amendment. So you don't necessarily want someone going in there and taking away your right to religion, press, and assembly just on a whim. So it's designed to be deliberately difficult to modify. Nonetheless, the founders also understood that as the nation matured and as times changed, there might be reasons why new amendments had to be added. And as the 27 amendments we have give testament to, there certainly were things that needed to be added. And so two methods exist. So the first method is that first, 2/3 of Congress must vote in favor of the amendment. Then it goes to the states, where 2/3 of the states need to also ratify it. So that's the agreement. 2/3 have to agree in Congress. 2/3 of the states have to agree to fully ratify it. If that does not happen, the amendment does not pass. Now, the second method that's allowed is that if a constitutional convention is convened, then at the constitutional convention, new amendments can be added to the document. Now, it should be noted, of the 27 amendments, all 27 have been procured by the first method. Since the original 1780s, when the initial Constitutional Convention was held, not a single Constitutional Convention has been convened since. So, since that time, no one has attempted to convene, or no one has successfully convened another Constitutional Convention. So this one's never been done before. But those are the two methods. So, in the homework we're going to get into a little bit, we're going to be looking at the amendments first, and then we're also going to be looking at some failed amendments. Some ideas that were going to be part of the Constitution, but didn't quite get enough senatorial or popular support to actually become amendments. We're going to be taking a look